right. Good evening, everyone. John Harris here, managing partner with Fortune Management. This is 21st Century Dentistry, and I have with me this evening a very good friend and colleague, client of ours for several years, wonderful man, mentor, leader, just all around good guy, decent golfer, Dr. Kevin Reed.
Thank you, John.
Kevin, how are you?
I'm good, man. I mean, I got a challenge a decent golfer. You just told me you won a tournament before we came on air with this great golfer who was a 10 to 12 handicap. And so I just let you know I'm a 10 handicap. So just so you know.
Yeah, there you go. And that's the kind of person I want on my team.
So you got to put it all in perspective, decent right. Versus this other guy was great. So I don't know.
Right. One quick shameful plug really quick for everyone that's listening. We try to do these as often as I can, 21st Century Dentistry, where I'm interviewing other industry professionals, doctors, bank representatives, attorneys, accountants, to try to bring the most relevant, modern, cutting-edge information technology to you as possible. Just open discussion. And then also the Real Dental Podcast, which is our Mid-South dental coaching team, where we're just discussing all things, barriers, obstacles, opportunities that we run into with our clients and how we navigate some of those. But if you enjoy the content that we share on these podcasts, please subscribe and like the video, share it with your friends. It really helps us in the algorithm to get this content out to more people. And if there are things that you want to see us discuss, or Q&A, which is a format that I'm fixing to start rolling out here pretty soon, as I get questions in my Instagram account and on YouTube, I compile those, and then we'll do Q&A sessions to kind of hammer some of those things out. But if you like the content that we're sharing, you want more of it, please subscribe, like our videos, send them to your friends and family. We really appreciate the support and grateful to have you as a subscriber and someone who dials in and tunes into the information that we're sharing. So,
John, how do you, being an older guy, how do you subscribe? Is that obvious to everybody?
Yeah, I think you can subscribe through iTunes and Apple Podcasts. There's just probably, if you log in there and search the podcast name, YouTube, you can look us up on YouTube and just hit the subscribe button. And
so 21st Century Dentist, that's what this is?
21st Century Dentistry.
Got it. Okay, bud.
So I try to take two different approaches with these things. It's the 21st Century Dentistry podcast is where I'm just interviewing a variety of different, a diverse panel of industry professionals that have expertise in one area or another. And then the Real Dental Podcast is really just an open discussion format with me, Carrie, Reagan, just all of our coaches here in the Southeast. And we're talking about, just some of the common challenges that dentists are running into, like right now, turnover and employee retention. And, how are you addressing the situations when, you've got people coming and asking you for raises and all that kind of stuff. So what are the common challenges that we need to be able to overcome? And hopefully we're providing some value out there that can help people get better results.
Sounds good.
So with that said, a lot to discuss this evening. I'm grateful to have Dr. Kevin with me because he really has a wealth of knowledge and experience. Third generation dentist, second generation dentist. Your son's now the third generation. So you bought the practice from your father many years ago. Dr. Taylor is now acquiring equity from you, multi-location owner, been in the business for how many years now?
My dad started in 49, so 73 years.
73 years. And then how long?
I came in with him 40 years ago, and Taylor came in with me 5 years ago.
Yeah. So you've been practicing for 40 years. Dr. Taylor's been in there for 5. And I mean, he really came out of the gate storming, just hitting home runs left and right. And I'm confident that had something to do with your mentorship. But yeah, so kind of like to pick your brain a little bit and kind of find out what some of the best practices you believe in are, the philosophy that you subscribe to, and how can we help more general dentists out there create the quality of life and work-life balance that they want while also building a successful, thriving dental practice. Seems challenging enough, right?
There's been plenty challenging, and it gets more challenging every year. That's for sure.
So what kind of changes have you seen over the last 40 years? Because that's a pretty long period of time. And I looked up and I saw that there were 5 major, like, life-changing inventions in the 20th century. And those are things like, yeah, those things like the internet, the incandescent light bulb, the steam engine. I mean, things that like change the way that we live life. There have already been 5 in the first quarter century of 2000 or the 21st century. There's already been 5. So if we're not able to adapt to change very quickly, probably going to need to make some adjustments there, because if you think we changed a lot in the last 100 years, just wait until the next 20.
Right.
So what do you think some of the biggest changes were that you've seen coming up that really required you to get creative in your approach and how you responded?
You're talking about over the 40 years, right?
Huh?
Yeah. Well, when it started out, you got to go way back to 82. And I was coming into a practice that started in 49. So, first of all, the first probably 10 years, 5 to 10 years, you're probably 10 years, a young dentist coming in, the biggest change is learning how to be a dentist. I mean, about this much. You know a thimbleful. You know enough to get out of dental school from a dental standpoint. You know absolutely nothing from a business standpoint. And your knowledge in dentistry when you get out is, again, very minimal. So you're spending the first 8 to 10 years just doing a lot of continuing ed, a lot of studying, a lot of working with other mentors, study clubs, my father, people like that, just people that have been doing it longer. So that was probably the biggest changes, was just learning more dentistry. Yeah. And then once you did that, then it was a matter of how are you going to manage your career? You're now 8 to 10 years in, you develop some level of productivity. And for me, at that point, it was changing philosophies a little bit, kind of merging from being a clinic. When I came in, and this is the way a lot of dentistry was. It wasn't a slight on my dad, but when I came in, the first 30 minutes in the morning, the first 30 minutes after lunch, you were taking out a triage of teeth. You weren't necessarily taking x-rays on all those, and you were setting things up for partials and dentures and some crowns, right? Well, 10 years in, you're already doing things differently. You're learning things differently. So for me, the next big transition was changing philosophies, and changing philosophies was hiring a coach. Y'all call them coaches, and I understand that. Back then, we called them consultants, but I get coach. And, 1992, 10 years out, I hired a coach to come in 4 times a year for $50,000 a year. And most people back then didn't think you did it that way, or most of my peers didn't at my age and even older. That changed my philosophies and organizational system. And then that particular person, after a year or two, sent me to the Pankey Institute. So there's other ones out there, Coas and Spear, and, they weren't then, but they are now. So there's a lot of places to get, again, further education, more defined development. And then there's all the, then as you go along, every 5 years, I'd say every 5 years, so you would say in the first 22 years, there's been 5 major changes. Well, I would say in a dental practice, every 5 years, if my dad said this, I believe this, and I've seen it true in my career. If you look back 5 years ago, if you're doing things the same way you were then, you're not studying and moving ahead and staying in current contact with technology and change and people. So let's talk about that. The biggest changes that I've seen in my career are in technology. That started way back, okay? Technology, if you call this technology, but advances in dentistry. 1969, which is before my time, but in 1969 is an earmarked time because I know my dad did 2 things 20 years into his career. He put nitrous oxide in the operatories. That was kind of a new thing. And he got a panoramic x-ray. That sounds kind of archaic now, but it was big back then. So in 1982, we came in, we had one thing, but if you look every 5 years, the kind of technology that I've seen, so the things that I see change are the technology. 6 years ago, we put in a CBCT. A year ago, we put in another CBCT in our satellite office because it's so valuable. 2004, we went to digital dentistry. I mean, beginning of digital dentistry with x-rays and all that. That was considered a big deal 18 years ago. Not a lot of people were doing that, but now everybody does that, right? Or 85 or 90% do. CBCTs, John, you can probably tell me better than me, but basically my research would say that's probably in about 10 to 15% of the offices. General dentists.
Yeah, I just had this
endodontists,
conversation.
endodontists, oral surgeons, and all that is probably in there 85 or 90, probably 100%. But general dentists is probably 10 or 15%. But in another 5 years, we've had our 6, and we've got 2 now. But in another 5 years, that's going to probably be in 65 or 70% of offices, right? Because it's probably going to be standard of care, right? So that's an example. iPhones. There was no such thing as an iPhone 20 years ago. That's changed. So that's changed communication. That changed communication with your team. It changed communication with each other. People.
Text with patients.
People, yeah, exactly. We started doing that 10 years ago, and that was before a lot of people were doing that. But now everybody does that, right? It's like you pay a service to do that. We started that in probably 12, 14 years ago, but now everybody does it. People have changed. Your clients have changed. Okay. Over this span of time that I'm talking about, when I came out working, I got there at 8, I left at 6:30. I worked Monday through Friday. If it was really busy, I worked some Saturday mornings. That's 1982. Done that in a long time, right? 2000, I changed my hours from 7 to 4. Okay. And everybody said, my team, oh, you're going to lose all those 4 o'clock patients. You're going to lose a lot of patients. What I really found was we gained better patients from 7 to 8 in the morning than the patients were from 4 to 5. And why is that? Because people in the world have changed in the last 20 something years. They get their day busy and they don't want to go to the dentist at 4 o'clock because they're doing the same thing I was doing back then. They're going to some kid's ball game, or they're going to hit shag balls, or they want to do stuff at the end of the day that's quality of life. So people have changed. Okay. Businesses have changed towards those people. They let them off more. They let them go to these appointments. Heck, what's happened in the last 2.5 years? They're working at home, right? They're working at home. They schedule the appointments anytime they want. So 7 to 4 turned out to be a really, really good change. And now we're through Friday afternoons. We don't work Friday afternoons. You know why? Because quite honestly, get on the main thoroughfares in your city at 1 or 1:30 in the afternoon. And what you're going to see is a mass exodus from office space to home and golf courses and out of town. Nobody works till 5 on Friday in general anymore. I know we have listeners that do, but I'm just saying. So people have changed. And then beyond just your clients have changed and their desires have changed. You have to change with that. They like same-day crowns. We didn't have same-day crowns 10 years ago. We've had them now for 7 years. But, we've really been doing it a lot in the last 3 or 4. They like that because they're there, they're done, and they don't come back. We like that, right? Our team members have changed. I'll be honest, we're struggling right now. Retaining assistants. We pay really well. We've increased the pay a bunch in the last year and a half, trying to increase that. We've always had a nice 401k matching up to the first 5%. We put in 4, but I guess there's some people, I don't know if people do more than that. Nice vacation, 2 to 3 weeks a year, not huge, the major holidays, we got a good package, health insurance, all that. But the people under 40 want different things. They probably want, and we're having to relook at that and try to see how that's going. And we're not the only one. I just saw the other day, Carrie sent me the other day some nice statistics. 36% of dentists right now are looking for dental assistance. This is according to the Health Policy Institute. 36% of dentists are looking for assistance right now. 29% are looking for hygienists, and 27% are looking for admin assistants. So you do the math. That's a third of the dentists having unfilled spots in all 3 areas, and we're experiencing that too. So the people we work with have changed. Their desires have changed. What they want from their workplace has changed. we're highly productive. We're highly skilled. We do excellent dentistry. We do it in a way that allows us to do a lot of it and care for patients in a relationship way. But that also puts a lot of team members have to really be moving all day long. And I don't know that the younger workers want that. I don't know. I'm just speaking off the cuff right now. I just had another one resign to go be a deputy county clerk somewhere. But so it's a different job for them. They're looking for something else. So that's a big change. That's a negative change to me as an administrator or trying to oversee that. But most of the changes I've described have been positive changes. Digital, all the technology changes have been positive. Best thing that's ever happened to us. All the technology changes. And that's what my dad said back in 1982. He said, when you get out, if you enjoy studying, enjoying changing, enjoying being a part of a process that it gets better and better, you'll love dentistry. And he said, if you look back every 5 years and you're doing things differently, you know that that's what you're doing and that's the reward that you get. So really all the things I talked about now that's happening currently, that's just part of the change. I mean, we've seen the change. You embrace the change. It's good. It's part of a bigger topic that, I don't have to share tonight, but it's part of a bigger topic that I've been twirling around for quite some time now. It's the whole idea about transitions and transformations. Mm-hmm. And quite honestly, what we're seeing as a microcosm in dentistry, if that's what the people listening might are dentists, but if you're other small businesses, what we're seeing is the experience of transitions. It's not peculiar. It's always been going on. It's not peculiar to people's individual lives. Transitions are going on all the time. As a matter of fact, so many transitions are going on with me, with you, with everybody we come in contact. It's not just in one area. It's in every area of your life. There's transitions. It might be a child going to college. It might be a child going to first grade. It might be having a child. It might be getting married. It all started, quite honestly, when we were born. It started before we were born. First change, sperm met the egg, and you became a formation, a person in a womb. And then you didn't ask to be kicked out. You got kicked out into the world. And what's the first response of most babies? What's the first response of most babies when they come kicking out?
Cry.
Yeah. It's abrupt. They're not so sure this isn't good. It's bright lights. It's cold. I'm not in there where I loved it. And I have no idea what's fixing to happen. And that's one of the very first transitions we go through. And it continues our entire life. We're transitioning as individuals. And those transitions are also a part of our businesses because it's people involved in our businesses. It's our clients. It's our team. It's ourselves. And so that's where I'm centered. And I didn't really understand that I've always embraced that. I've always embraced transition and change. That doesn't mean I've always wanted to change. Sometimes I dug my heels in and I was slower to change. But in reality, I'm crystallizing it now to a lot more up front in my mind and my heart about what's happening all the time. And there's core truths that you embrace. If you're going to be in a transition, you're moving towards a transformation. When you get to that transformation, you're in another transition, okay, whatever that is. So that's exciting. It's not intimidating. It's exciting. But the tendency is that we want our transitions to be perfect. We want our transitions to be perfect. And that's just not the way life is. Our transitions are imperfect, but within them, we learn more about how to be more in a place where we want to be. And that's our move towards, not perfection, but that's our move towards something that's better than where we are. Take a relationship. Let's take a relationship. I know we're doing dentistry, but dentistry is about relationships. So let's take a relationship. Man and a woman, they meet, they date, they love them, they love each other, they're having great times, everything's great. And all of a sudden, one or the other, usually it's not at the same time, one or the other decides they're ready to make a transition. And the two either don't agree on the transition or one just says, it's not going to happen. And so I'm moving on. I'm transforming to something else. That leaves one person thinking they're moving where they want to, just like an employee leaving and the boss thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want that employee to leave. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is a bad transition. Or the other one's thinking this is a great transition. Well, in reality, both of them are imperfect transitions, right? Because the person going to the next place is probably not going to have the world of Oz they thought they were going to have, right? They're probably not going to have everything as great as they thought. And the one that's losing in that relationship in their mind is probably not losing. They're probably gaining greater understanding. You're going to move to even a better relationship afterwards. That's an example of how transitions are constantly morphing. And I think it's important to embrace that. I think it's important to understand that we were made for transitions. We were not made to resist transitions. I was looking for a quote here if I can find it, but we're intended as human beings to have transitions. Whatever, we're not going to get religious, but whatever your faith basis comes from, wherever you think things started from, nothing is like it was millions of years ago. And we have this short period of time that we get to experience those transitions and changes, right? Two things I'll say about that. There's a Danish philosopher that said in the 1700s, he said, science tells us that our bones will lay in the ground for maybe 12 million years. But in reality, they only have a short exposure to living time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's important to remember. We have a short exposure to living time. And during that time, we're transitioning. So we can resist the transition or we can embrace the transition because we know each day is a gift for the next day. Sat next to a man last night and, somehow I got to talking to him. I don't know how that happened, but we were sitting at a restaurant and it was kind of after dinner. We were having a cocktail and we were talking and he said something that I thought was really cool. He's from Texas. He's a rancher. He has 7 kids and he has like 22 grandchildren. And he said one of the things his grandchildren all learn early on with him, his kids already know, but the young ones start to learn that he has a phrase that he likes to say. If they say they're afraid, they're not sure how something's going to work out or, what's going to happen, he always says, well, just remember this. Death only happens one time, but you live every day. Mm-hmm. You live every day. And I think that's important. That's important. So when you say what has changed in the last 40 years, I can't remember them all, but I can tell you each one that I've embraced has been a good transition, even though I might then have to transition again to get to the next best place I want it to be. Yeah. So it's a process. One of my mentors used to say, life is a process. If you don't like the process, you're going to hate the end. And I think that's an apropos statement. Yeah. So the core truths in transition are important to me. And to do just a few, you have to, when you see things changing, when things are not staying the same, when the breakup in the relationship happens, whatever it is, an employee, a loved one, a child, whatever it is, when you start to see breaks in your life or things happening in your life that you wish didn't happen or that you can't control, the very first core truth that makes every transition based on moving forward in a good way, the very first core is accept what is. Accept what is. That means you acknowledge this is exactly the way it is. I wish it was different. I'm going to get further down this. I'll help you realize how to move from that. But the first thing you have to do is accept what is. Someone once said, and accepting what is means that you accept the parts that you can't control or that you can't change at that very moment. Before we can change, or when a change happens, is when to remain in that what is. Change happens when to remain in that what is, that moment, to remain in that position. Change happens when to remain in that what is more painful than the outcome of the change. So you can't change until you acknowledge and accept what is. Exactly with truth. This is what is. Second thing about that means if I'm going to accept what is, right? If I'm going to accept this moment, then I can't have resistance. I've got to drop resistance. And most people think they've accepted what is, but if they look at their actions and their feelings, they're still resisting it, right? They're still trying to say, no, that's not what it is. And it's okay to say it's not what you want it to be. It's not okay to be resisting it and saying that's not what it is. That is what it is, okay? And any resistance to what it is doesn't do anything but keep you from moving forward because you're stuck right there proving that that's not what is. So you drop resistance. And the third thing you do is you take your losses. You take your losses. That means you own your losses. That means that I see what is. I'm not going to resist this because it is what it is. But I have a sadness, or I have a happiness, or I have whatever it is. But usually it's a loss. And if it's a loss, you let it go. You let it go, and you give it time to leave. Because I can say I took a loss. Again, we've all been in relationships that we felt like we're a loss, and you don't necessarily get over it when they walk out the door, whoever that is. It takes a period of time to take your loss, but you work on moving towards taking your losses. We see that in divorces. We see that in, you name it, you take your loss. We see that in the career change. We see that in dentistry, and something about my office that I wish would continue the same way, and I realize it's not going to. There's a loss there for me because it's not like it used to be that I really love, but I've got to move out of that, and I've got to take that loss because until I take it. Compare it to the stock market. If you've got a stock selling at $100 and it drops to 25, okay, and you just hang on to it for a while because we're not sure how the market's going to go. But then you finally decide it gets up to 40 and then it drops back to 25 and you bought it for 100. And you finally realize after some period of time, whenever it is you want to make that realization, that company and its product is never going to be worth $100 again. And how many people have that situation and won't sell that stock? Yeah, because it's taken a loss, right? When they sell it, they take a loss. Until they sell it, they always have hope that it's going to be different, even though they've analyzed it and they know it's not, right? So accept what is, drop resistance, take your losses. This is one you'll like, John. Establish your certainty. What do you know that you can continue to do that you're certain that you can count on and do it? That's certainty. And I don't think you can be certain about everything, but I think when you're in those times where you've got some losses, where you've got some resistance, you've got to figure out the area that you can step into that you feel certain about, because that gives you some confidence. And then the next step is to clearly state and own your truth at that moment. After all that experience, what is your truth right now? What is your truth that comes out of this, that's happening in this transition? Seek wise counsel if you need to establish that truth. And so you can then take the what is, you can take the loss, you can take where you are. Do you have to stay there your whole time? No, that's why it's called a transition. You're going to move to a transformation. You're going to move to a result of that transition that is a better place. And you do that by establishing an intention to have a different outcome. And you can trust your intentions. You can trust your intentions because if your intention guides you, then the intuition that comes from that formulates your actions. If you have intention to have a different outcome and you trust your intuition that comes out of that for your action. In other words, that feeling inside that you just say, I don't know every step about it. There's a little bit of risk here, but it feels like, based on the outcome I want to have happen, it feels like now, after letting it sit a little bit and feeling it, my intuition tells me that this is the next action. It won't be the final action, but it's the next part of moving through the transition. And that's intuition formulating your action. And if you do that, if you start with intention, you move to intuition, which is letting go of your brain a little bit I've known you well enough, John, that's probably a challenge at times. It is for me too. It is for everybody, right? It is for everybody, but it is more so from some of the others. I'm kind of a visionary, so I let mine go a little quicker than you. My son Taylor's an engineer. He stays in his brain longer. Nothing wrong with being in your brain. It's a good place to be. It's a computer. But you got to get out of the computer to get to the heart, and the heart's where your intuition is. And your heart and your intuition will tell you what the next action should be. Once you've already established in your brain, that computer, that you're not just totally dumb, you're kind of in a general area of thinking that's right, but you don't know yet what the first steps are. That's intuition in your heart. And when you come at it that way, analyze it, form intention, shift the intention to your heart where your intuition is, and make the move, make the first moves. You can trust it. You can trust it. As one of my mentors used to say, Kendrick used to say, when you do all that, you can trust it. So you go ahead and jump, and the net will always appear.
Mm-hmm.
And the net jump, and the net will always appear. So that's kind of you. When you talk about transitions in 40 years, there's a lot of examples, but the whole sum of it is what I see in 40 years is I've come to this. I've come to this, that it's always changing. Everything is changing, and we can trust the core principles. And what I just laid out are core truths. The core truths, they're not the same thing, but it's like when Stephen Covey wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He considered that core principles, that when you take all the precipitate out and get to the bottom of the beaker, they were always solid and they were always there. They're kind of the foundation. And I think what I laid out there are the foundations for making successful transitions. That doesn't mean that when you get through with the transitions, or please hear me, when you get through the transition, that everything was perfect. Okay. It means that it's better than it was, that you have happiness and peace because you move towards another outcome that feels like you're in the right place at that moment.
Right.
That's how it's successful. If that sort of makes sense.
Yeah.
I hope that makes.
What I love about what you just said was that there's a common expression that I use, and it's faith in action.
Yeah.
Basically what that means is there's a scripture that I try to live my life by. I'm not perfect by any stretch, but I came across it many years ago. It's resonated with me ever since. And it says, for the spirit God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline. And so what that tells me is that when we were brought into this world, we were created to be courageous, disciplined, and love. But what happens is it's not the water around the ship that sinks the ship, it's the water that gets in. So over our 20, 30, 40 years, some of that water gets in, and it steers us off course a little bit, and life becomes more difficult. And it's becoming more difficult because we're operating from fear and anxiety, not courage, love, and self-discipline. And so faith in action is like, you can think about something and you can say you believe it. Like, I believe this to be true. I believe the net's going to catch me. I believe if I set the intention and then I chase intuition, I believe the net's going to catch me. You can say you believe it. But if you're not willing to take that step in faith, you think it's a really good idea. But if you had conviction behind that belief, then you would take that step forward because there's no question in your mind that the net's going to catch you.
Right. Now what you're trying to say, what you're not trying to say, what you've said very eloquently is exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what's the opposite of fear? What is the opposite of fear?
Love.
I think the opposite of fear is courage. And I think you can't have courage without fear. So if I say I have courage, but I didn't have fear, I didn't really have courage, I was okay to do it because I wasn't afraid of anything. Courage is doing the thing, taking the actions, as you say, when you are fearful. You're a little bit of afraid, like the guy in World War II, storming the bunker, right? If he's the guy that we've all known that some people could care less, they really don't think about it, they just do it, right? And they capture 10 people, and everybody says he had so much courage. He didn't have courage. He wasn't even afraid. But the guy sat down in the trench before they sent him out and about crapped in his pants, right? Yeah. But did it anyway because the order was he was supposed to do it, and he knew it was the right thing to do, and he had the courage. That's courage.
Yeah. Yeah. How does that quote go? There's a difference between stupidity and courage.
That's right. No,
You don't
that's
know
right.
enough to know that you should be afraid.
Yeah, that's right.
That's ignorance.
That's right.
That's lack of knowledge. But if you know enough to know that, hey, this could be painful and bad, and you do it anyway, that's absolutely courage.
And go ahead.
Stephen Hawking says that the definition of IQ, he defines IQ. I listen to Neil deGrasse a lot, and he's super intelligent guy.
Yeah,
scientist,
he is.
and he's able to speak in layman's terms, makes it easy for people like me to understand. And he asked Stephen Hawking one time. He says, "How do you define intelligence?" And he said he defines intelligence by a person's ability to adapt to change.
There you go.
So it made me think about a question I wanted to ask you, because
and adapting to change, if I can just interject real quick,
Sure.
Adapting to change is what we've just been talking about. That's transitions going to transformations. Go ahead.
Exactly. And this came to my mind as you were talking, because your belief systems around change are very, very uncommon. Like our number one human need, psychological human need, is certainty. And you've heard this said before: the only thing certain in life is that nothing's certain.
That's right. That's right.
But we
don't want to accept that. We don't want to accept that. Right. That's the very first part of doing well in change, is accepting that.
Yeah. And so it takes it. So to have an uncommon belief system about change, because I would say change is difficult for most people. I would argue most people avoid change.
It is difficult. It is difficult. It is difficult for everybody. Okay. Mm-hmm. Or to some degree. But the more that you recognize it and move through it and follow this kind of process, the more success you have with it, it starts to feel less uncertain. Does that make sense? It starts to feel more certain that your history tells you that you don't know the outcome, but you know, moving in the right direction, you will, trust in your heart and your intuition, you will come to a good outcome.
Well, I think the transition, to use your word, that occurs there is in the beginning. Let's say we don't have a lot of experience with change, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it through. I don't know how I'm going to respond. Right. I don't know if it's going to turn out okay.
Younger person, right?
And so I'm fearful. I'm afraid of change because I'm deriving most of my certainty from my circumstances. Are the circumstances going to turn out the way I want them to? Okay,
right.
So I'm afraid.
Right.
But as you mature, and as you get more experience with change, then the transition that takes place is you begin to learn to get your confidence from your ability. Your confidence is in yourself and not in your circumstances. And so it really doesn't matter if it works out.
Your confidence is in your past history, that yourself has found a way to move to better places.
Yeah.
Right. And and learn to be happy with that different place. And give it time to become happy. It doesn't have to be perfect from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. So there's a quote by and the deal is what you just said. We want to know all the outcomes, right, before we make the move. Most people want to have certainty that if I make this step, this is exactly what's going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And that's just even not my experience in 65 years of life. I mean, from the time I was even 5 or 6 years old, I can think back to things I thought for sure was going to go this way, and it didn't. And I had to make an adjustment, right? Yeah. That's just not the way real life works. But yet that's what we want. So another way of saying that is vision, then action, then understanding. So another way I would say it is create as big a vision as you can that you can understand and see as possibly being the right vision for you. And then what action should you start to take to support that, right? Mm-hmm. And as you do that action, you start to gain understanding. Mm-hmm. And then you tweak it, right? Then you tweak your action, you tweak your vision, right? That's our life. That's what this is all about with transition. It's just visioning. It's just seeing where you are, envisioning where you want to go, and then taking action. But what most of us want to do, and I'm the same way, we get stuck in the idea that we have a vision of where we want to be. We want complete understanding before we step that foot out into that cold water. Okay.
Yeah.
We want complete understanding how we're going to float, right? And then we say, then we're going to take action. And what always happens when you do that? You either don't take the action or you take it too late. And if you take it too late, what happens? It doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
Yeah.
So
you just said the same thing that Mel Robbins says. She calls it the competence confidence loop. Like people want to have the confidence to take the step forward, but if they don't take the step forward, they don't develop the competence, and the competence is what creates the confidence.
That's right. No, I 100% was saying the same thing. So like a personal example for me, which is a plug too. I can do a plug, right, while we're on here, but it's a personal example. It's a personal example. So 15 months ago, I decided I guess you can't really call it a podcast at this particular moment because I'm not necessarily interviewing anybody else. I'm being interviewed. Okay. But the idea would be that I will eventually have conversations with other people like you're doing today. Right. Mm-hmm. So, we've filmed about and recorded about 10 hours, just to have a basis, but then I've been sitting on that 10 hours for about 4 months. Well, number one, we had to come up with a name. Well, I wasn't really sure about the name. We are going to release it in the next few weeks, I think. So if anybody out there is looking, it'll be called Backseat Driver. We may change it somewhere down the road, but that's that's it. I'm going to be in the car with you, and we're taking a journey, and I'm a backseat driver. We're just going to talk about the different turns and changes and what might be good. And it'll be the 10 hours we have are across the board. I think they're kind of fun. I think people are really going to like it. But I wouldn't release it. This is the point. I wouldn't release it. I wouldn't let my advertiser builder release it. I wouldn't do it. I had a team. Carrie's on there, Ken's on there, people, I had a team. I said, no, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready. 2 weeks ago, I read this quote. And I want to read it right now because it relates exactly to what we were just talking about making the changes before you know everything, right? Mm-hmm. This is by Leonard Cohen. You know who Leonard Cohen is? Mm-hmm. I don't know if you do or not. Wears the hat, the little black tie. He's dead now. Coat, and he sang gravelly voice, and he was a poet, and he was a songwriter like Bob Dylan. So he's a poet and like a Bob Dylan songwriter. Really, really good. Didn't have the greatest voice, but he's got the one song everybody's heard called Hallelujah, and he's got others. But I ran across this quote, and what it was in a book. There it is right there. You can kind of sort of see it's on a piece of paper, and I'll read it to you. But it was in another book that I was reading that I saw on the shelf, and I was working through these ideas, not necessarily about what we were doing now, but just what I'm constantly trying to work through. And so I pulled that book off the shelf on a Saturday afternoon, and this card falls out 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago. And it's a quote by Leonard Cohen. And this is the quote: "Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in." And I just read that, and what that spoke to me was, forget your perfect offering. Forget until you get it perfect, right? Forget until you figured everything else about it. There's going to be a crack in it. There's going to be something that wasn't exactly the way you planned. But that's how the light gets in. And what he means by that, that's where the new ideas come from. Yeah. Otherwise, you'd just be in a dark room sealed in. And so so what happened when I read that, within 20 minutes, I called my guy up, HUD, and I said, "Hey, throw it out there." He says, "What's that?" I said, "This is it. Here's the opening statement, and throw it out there. We're ready to go." And wherever it goes is where it'll go. And folks, if you're listening to this today, hop on there in a week or two and listen. But it was that. Forget your perfect offering.
What platforms is it going to be on? Apple Podcast, iTunes?
I wish I knew more about it, that sort of thing, and I don't, as HUD does. But I'm sure it'll be on Facebook. It'll be on iTunes. It'll be on YouTube because we got video. I know those three for sure.
Yeah. As you were walking through your core truths, I wrote them all down, by the way. Yep. And then as you were explaining the transformation, and I drew that loop because it looks just like Mel Robbins' confidence loop.
Sure.
The thing that was bouncing around in my head as you were talking is you should write a book.
Well, you're probably right. and sort of writing a book as I do these things. But in my book, I guess I had another guy tell me that a couple of years ago. I was sitting at a dinner table with a young guy, about 30, and I went through whatever ideas I was going through at that particular moment. And when the dinner was over, I said, I probably talked too much. And he said, man, I've learned so much tonight. He said, you just told me half a book. You didn't need to put that down and then write the other half. But that's probably true. I would like to.
Yeah, I'd like to see you write a book, and I'd like to see you prepare a keynote.
What does that mean?
That means you are the keynote speaker at a large event, like DS World brings in keynote speakers, pays them $50,000-$100,000 to deliver a 30 to 60-minute presentation.
I would love to do that.
Brittany's doing a TED Talk in April about overcoming adversity because of her past, and the people that put it together here in Tullahoma knew her and where she came from and where she's made it to. And they're like, that's a great person, to speak on adversity. And that was the theme of the TEDx.
Is that a TEDx, or are those still 18 minutes or whatever?
Something, I think they're like, 15 to 20, 13 to 18.
Some like certain time. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Some kind of window like that. Yeah. But it's on like unique ideas, like thoughts outside the box. And so that would be, I think, taking that content and putting it into a keynote. I mean, that would be perfect for a TED Talk.
Well, and actually, what I have here, every one of those things I listed to you, I've got parts underneath it. I've got subsets of each one. Oh, yeah. That's examples or whatever. I was just trying to get through it sort of quick, but I gave it to the team last week, and I've had several text me this week, and they said, by the way, thank you for your talk Thursday. It meant a lot. And I don't know what that means, but it feels like they felt like they could apply it.
Yeah, I think that, Kevin, that's your next level contribution. I mean, you've done enough for the community doing dentistry.
Right.
You've done enough for the community, providing jobs and putting food on people's tables, and you've successfully transitioned your son in. Man, if you're looking for like what's the next level, okay? Looking at being an author and a speaker, man, you've got a wealth of knowledge and experience that I think and you can articulate it very well and structure the content very well. I think it'd be fun. Brittany and I are going through, we just went through HPS Core, which is a 2-day course. And then we're going through HPS Grad, which is a 9-month course. And
what does that stand for? What's that stand for?
It's heroic public speaking.
Oh,
and so I went through one of their courses 3 or 4 years ago. We went through again and took Brittany through because she's ready for her TED Talk. I'm just trying to sharpen my speaking skills.
Yeah.
And then we decided to go through HPS Core or HPS Grad, which is a pretty substantial investment. I mean, it's not cheap, but I mean, the quality of coaching and direction and guidance that you're getting going through that thing, they don't just help you design your keynote. They also help you structure your book. So they help you take what's in your brain and structure it and formulate it into words that you can then, deliver in a presentation, or words that you can structure and deliver in a book.
Right.
And so I'm incredibly excited about that. We start this month. Matter of fact, our first webinars this month. So part of it's,
I was going to say, do you do it by Zoom? Is that how it works?
A lot of it. Yeah, it's 3 terms, first, second, third term. I think the first term is all webinars.
And how many would that be? How many webinars?
I think they're like 2 a month.
For a period of time?
Yeah, or like 1 a week or something like that. They're about 90 minutes.
For like 3 months or 4 months?
The whole course is about 9 months.
Total.
So all 3 terms. And it's broken into terms. And they do like 90-minute. And when they record them, so if you can't attend it, then you can watch the recording. But they're walking you through how to structure the content. They're walking you through certain strategies and how to put certain words together to have an emotional impact on the audience. They're phenomenal. They are absolutely incredible. I recommend them to everybody.
Well, I would love to have some information on that. About 18 months ago or 16 months ago is when I did my first, quote, personal retreat.
Mm-hmm.
And what came out of that week was, in a nutshell, what I distilled from that was I have had a voice in dentistry for a long time. I've had a voice with my team once a month for for an hour, and the whole meeting 3 hours for the last 10 or 12 years. We've been pretty structured about it. But I know as I transition, and Taylor's doing a great job, that ultimately, before I lose the things that I feel good, gifted at being able to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not ready for my voice to be done. So the theme of that week was, well, what's your future voice? And one of the things is, I don't know how it will happen, but one of the things is I've got this track of dentistry, right? Track of dentistry. All right. And I've been on it. And now I'm starting laying these tracks next to it that maybe will be, I can't do that on this. Yeah, there you go. So I'm on dentistry. And then now I got this other track that I'm trying to move next to it, like a train track.
Yeah.
And it's not got much impetus behind it yet. I'm hoping this fall, I appreciate the opportunity to do this. I hope to release the podcast information that we do have, Backseat Driver. I hope to release that. And then I think I'm doing a presentation, part of a presentation with Carrie's group for the camp. Yeah. In about 3 months, 2 or 3 months. And I'm hoping this falls an impetus for that, because there's that other track, the gift of relating to people ideas that we've been working on our whole lives that I think are successful. Helping people. What I would say is I would like to help people in the future. I've helped my team. I help my patients. I help my friends that I'm in contact with. I'd like to help a bigger group of people find a way to expand their lives. Yeah. Find a way to see something beyond the ceiling that they see. Yeah. Because mentors have done that for me for the last 30, 40 years, especially Kendrick, the last 12, and the group that I've worked with that. And I would like to offer that out so other people can have a little different vision. Yeah.
I don't know that there's a better way to achieve that mission than writing a book.
I think you're probably writing a book, because you probably have to write the book to be able to speak. But for me, quite honestly, I can write a book and I can put words down, and I do in my journals and things. But my biggest gift, quite honestly, is in front of a group. Yeah. And that one-on-one, that contact. I'm able to connect with the people there, and the message starts. I have a core message, but it starts formulating itself when I see what people are kind of responding to. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Yeah. What Michael told me was, because I asked him the same question. I was like, what does it make sense to do first? Like build the outline to structure the book or the speech? And he says, always do the speech first. He said, always do the speech first. And then it makes it a whole lot easier to develop, to create the content for the book.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I've done that for a long, and I was telling one of my mentors, Ken, I was telling him one of the struggles I've had with the podcast. I don't have a struggle if I have a group of 2 or 3 people there and maybe somebody's asking me a question or I'm seeing their responses, right? The issue is I'm sitting at this desk by myself trying to create the questions sometimes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's not in response to something else. And so I'm working on that. How can I make being here by myself feel like, I'm with somebody else? So the other thing I could do, which Ken suggested, was not a bad idea. Just somebody like you, somebody like Carrie, people I respect, my son, I say, hey, I want to talk on this topic in a week or so. Would you be available for about an hour? I'm going to talk on the phone. I'm going to record it, but I just want to talk to you and you respond back and we respond back and forth, because I think it will help me pass this little block. It'll help me move forward.
I noticed that because they're like, one thing I struggle with content development is like recording Q&As. Like I need to set my phone up and I need to talk about something for 5 minutes, like mergers and acquisitions or employee retention. And it's harder for me to articulate my thoughts that way than it is having an open dialogue with somebody. Right. And we're bouncing ideas back and forth. And then it's almost like my brain just magically comes up with stuff that I want to say.
And so therefore, I'm trying to be a creative in this process. How can I create that? And so then the people I'm talking to can be a part of what I edit or not. It doesn't matter, but it's helping me then leave that conversation. And I spend another hour with it the next day while I'm hot on it and develop it out, which is kind of what he was saying. I know this session is probably close to ending, but I want to finish with one I want to finish with a reading, and it's only a page. It won't take long.
Yeah,
It's
go
a
for
poem.
it.
It's a poem. It's a poem, and I'd like for the listeners to hear this because I think it absolutely speaks to what we've been talking about this entire time. And I think you'll relate to this too. It's by John O'Donohue, who I love. And I've read this on my podcast, but I think it would be good on this one. It's called For a New Beginning. In out of the way places of the heart where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown, still unable to move into the transition is the way I would say that. But anyway, it watched you play with the seduction of safety and the gray promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight, when your courage kindled, and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. And though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of new beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm for your soul senses the world that awaits you. Intuition, intention, courage, taking risk. Hold nothing back. That's not in there. That's me. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease and risk. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm for your soul senses the world that awaits you. That speaks to me.
Yeah.
I think that speaks to people.
I think there's a huge caveat that stems off of this discussion, and it's about leadership. Because that's what, in my opinion at least, that's what great leaders do. People follow leaders because leaders instill certainty. They have more confidence than I have. That's why I follow them. Well, where do they get their confidence from? They have learned not to get their confidence from their circumstances, but from themselves by doing exactly what you've just described.
From their past that they've experienced, right?
Yeah.
That they've been able to turn that around to where they see the successes in it and not just look at the failures.
Yeah. And that's exactly the weight that the world puts on the shoulders of leaders, and it is to embrace the change first. So it reminds me of Marianne Williamson's poem, and I don't know the entire thing off the top of my head, but the most profound component of that entire poem ends with, as we let our own light shine, as we let our own light shine, our presence, or as we're liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others.
That's right.
So leaders take the first bullet, and it lets everybody know it's okay. And then everybody else then starts to embrace the same change. So it's they
perfect.
I mean,
and also I think what happens with that is leaders understand that they can't come from a place of BS. I mean, there may be leaders that look like they're leaders, but when it's all said and done, they're not honored as leaders and they stop leading people because they're not coming from the one place you have to come from, truth.
Yeah.
Now, that truth is your truth. It doesn't mean it's the people's truth that you're talking to, but they will respect your truth. They will respect your truth. They may not adopt it, but they'll respect that you're coming from truth, and they'll listen.
Yeah.
And with their listening, even if they don't adopt all of it, if my team members don't adopt everything about what I talk about on those Thursdays, they still adopt pieces of it. And they then develop it from their point of view of truth, right? That's the leadership, teaching them how to take things and create leadership for themselves and their families, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is what she was saying, which is what, say that quote again. She said, when
it says, as we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others.
Yep. Another way of saying that, as we speak from our own truth that came from our fear that we tread through, it opens the truth for the people that are listening to be able to make their own journey.
Exactly.
That's another way of saying it.
It gives people permission.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That's absolutely what it does. It gives people permission. They're like, oh, Amen. Okay, it's okay. I can do that too. And everything's not okay. You know,
that's right.
An incredible thing. Yeah. I think there's maybe that's book number 2. That's a whole nother sequel to that first conversation. I think
you know, what's interesting though, everything we've been talking about tonight, in my opinion, can be in the same book because it's all what leadership. If you was doing a leadership seminar tomorrow, we had to go 3 days. This would be part of the 3 days.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's because you know what I mean? How to handle transitions is a part of leadership, because you can't be a leader if you can't transition.
Right.
If you don't look forward to the transformation, but when you get to the transformation, you look forward to, but there's the next transformation.
Oh, it's another
the next transition.
Another good one. You got to be passionate about it. You've got to look forward to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a bookmark I found in the bookstore, I don't know, 4 months ago, but it jumped out here tonight when I walked in. I don't know how it ended up on the desk. I don't remember seeing it, but it's very appropriate. And it's just what we just said. What you want to ignite in others must first burn inside yourself. That's what you just said, I think. It's your passion comes forward. What you want to ignite in others must first burn inside yourself. That's your truth. Yeah. That's speaking your truth.
Yeah.
And my wife gets frustrated sometimes. We've been married 42 years, so she gets frustrated more than sometimes. But she'll say to me, well, that's not, you're saying something different. That's not what you said. Last year you said this, or 2 years ago you said this, or you used to always say this. Now you're saying this. I said, yeah, because I've learned more about my truth. It was true when I said it.
Right.
And there's still parts of it that are true, right?
I find that's challenging for people. When I try to be completely transparent and authentic. This is what I feel. This is what I believe at this very moment. I can't guarantee you it's going to be the exact same tomorrow. But right now, this is where I'm coming from. This is exactly how I feel.
If you're
other people are like, that shouldn't change. It should always be the same.
That's right. And my wife, and it depends on the person. My wife's a C, and man, she can't handle it. I mean, that bothers her. But then she's learned to just, sometimes she doesn't listen to the next thing I say because say, well, he's going to change it next year anyway.
Right.
But it's all part of believing in your understanding is always evolving.
Yes.
Your truth is never static. Truth is dynamic. Okay. So the book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. If you haven't read that, I'm going to highly recommend it to your listeners out there. I read it 40 years ago and rereading it right now. And one of the core things that's in there, without getting too long with it, but basically it's a kind of a true story, but it's written fictionally, if that makes sense. I don't know how that works, but it's kind of about the guy's journey. He was a nuclear physicist or a chemistry physicist. He was just super smart, right? Laboratory, super smart, like a prodigy. Probably went to college at 16 or something. His whole idea was he was going to prove in the laboratory and get down to the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth. Okay. He went crazy. Because as he went to the ultimate truth, what did it do? It got bigger. Yeah. It wasn't an apex that came. It wasn't a foundational information that came down to an apex. It was an apex.
Go like this. It doesn't go like this. It goes like that.
Out.
Yeah, it goes out. Yeah.
And the more you understand, the more you learn, the more truth you get. You realize the truth is bigger than what you ever imagined.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of transitions. That's the beauty of the transformation. That's the beauty of understanding that truth is not static. Truth is dynamic.
Yeah.
And he saw his son in the book. He saw his son about 15 or 16 going through the same process that was driving his son crazy, who was super smart. And so he took him on a motorcycle ride around the country. And every other chapter is about how you maintain a motorcycle. And the other next chapter is about Zen or something. It's very, very interesting book, but it gets you thinking.
Dr. Kevin, it's been a pleasure having you with me this evening. I always enjoy our conversations. I love learning from you. And I know that the folks that are going to be watching this and listen to this are going to get a lot out of it as well. Keep an eye out for his podcast that has been released or getting ready to be released.
I've given it the okay.
Very good. So I imagine you're going to be able to find that. Yeah, I imagine you're going to be able to find that on Apple Podcast or iTunes. But if you can't, feel free to contact me through YouTube or Instagram, and we'll get the information that you need and we'll get it over to you. Again, if you're enjoying the content that we're sharing, please don't hesitate to subscribe and like this video. Share it with your friends and family. We are grateful for your support. Dr. Kevin, grateful for the time that you gave us tonight, and I look forward to doing this again soon in the very near future.
Appreciate you inviting me, John. I always enjoy our conversations because it makes me think even more. And you're great at that. And I appreciate your energy. And it's an honor to have been here with you tonight.
Likewise, my friend. We need to play some golf here soon.
I'm ready. I'm pretty good, Tenny. I'm pretty good. Take care, my man.
All right, you do the same.